Hello, I am Haley Duncan and welcome to 10 Minutes. In today's program, we will explore what life was like in the 1960s. You will hear from 4 people who lived during that era, as they recall historical events and moments that shaped their lives.
In 1960, I was born in 1951, so I would have been 9 in 1960.
I was 18 in 1960.
I was 19 in 1960.
In 1960, I was a senior in high school. I was 17 years old.
The 60s were, in many ways, a much more innocent time.
When I think about the 60s, I think about San Francisco.
I was busy, starting to raise a family. I was in the Army, a young lieutenant in the Army, and I really wasn't connected with a lot of stuff that went on outside of the Army. The Cuban Missile Crisis happened not long after I got in the Army.
All of that tension between the Russians and us as far as the nuclear capabilities and so on, we were afraid that the Russians were going to bomb us.
I was a nursing student, and we prepared for disasters and influx of wounded.
We were a little bit tense because, if we had gone to war, we'd have gotten real busy. And we came really close to it.
I think one of the things that came out of that was the sense in my generation that we weren't going to live past 30 anyway, so let's go be hippies and do all kinds of stuff.
I was walking down the hall from the mess hall, and this big, fat sergeant came by, and he said they just shot the president. And then as I walked back up to my room, I could hear radios. So I was walking by, I could hear radios and the newscast. And it started to sink in, and I went up and picked up my little portable radio and turned it on and started listening, and that was pretty bad.
When John F. Kennedy was assassinated, I was in the 7th grade, and as a matter of fact, I was actually in history class of all places when it came on that John F. Kennedy died.
And was at a friend's house, and I saw the news coverage and ended up watching the rest of the news coverage the rest of the day of his assassination.
When we heard on the news that John Kennedy had died, it was my job to go downstairs and lower the flag to half-staff. So I remember that very distinctly. Nothing like rock and roll. I mean, that's still it. Call it a lot of different things, but it's still rock and roll.
I love rock and roll music.
I thought rock and roll was pretty neat. It had fast songs, slow songs.
And then there was this new guy that came out called Elvis Presley. And the girls just loved him, and the guys just kind of, he's not that hot.
Elvis was probably #1, Elvis Presley.
But within a few months, we were combing our hair like him and wearing our collars up like him and trying to be cool like him.
My very favorite rock group would have to be the Beatles.
Well, hands down the Beatles. As far as I'm concerned, I still, when I hear music today, I still hear the Beatles. I hear their influence in just about everything that's still coming out today, from punk and grunge and all the rest of it.
Got in the Army in '62 before Vietnam started. I got out in '67 after it started going.
The circle of friends that I ran with during the Vietnam era were for our troops and for the war.
I didn't volunteer to go over there because I just had a sense that it was not a good war. I would have gone if they'd sent me, but I didn't volunteer to go.
What I remember about it was a lot of protesting, and a lot of people were upset about the war, and they wanted it to stop.
We certainly watched it on the news, and we certainly weren't happy about what was going on.
It was a very political war, and so I think a lot of the boys, when they came home from Vietnam, felt like they weren't honored. They really felt that they weren't given credit for what they had really gone over and done for this country.
The fashions in the 60s, the afros and the long hair and the funky clothes were pretty neat. I didn't wear a lot of them.
Well, I was to a certain degree a participant in the hippie look.
I loved the hippie look, and I think that, I mean, everybody kind of dressed that way during that time.
I thought the hippie look was pretty sloppy. You know, I was wearing uniforms every day. You know, you had to look nice.
So there was a lot of tie-dye and a lot of bell-bottom pants and peace signs, and it was just part of the look.
It was harmless. Now, as far as the clothes go, bell bottoms, they were nice. I mean, they're they're nice and loose at the bottom and all the rest of that.
I wore bell bottoms a little bit, but not much. I think I had 2 pair of bell bottoms, and I wore them a little while and didn't like them because they flopped around too much.
It was comfortable and fun, and it was part of the times that we were in.
The whole thing was fun.
The communications in the 60s were pretty much telephone and writing letters.
People mainly, if they're far apart, occasionally made long-distance calls.
You would pick it up, and you would wait for someone at the other end of the line to say, how can I help you? Who would you like to call? And then you would either tell them who you wanted to call, or you would tell them the number.
But they were expensive, so they wrote letters.
I can't remember, as far as communication is concerned, anything other than writing letters and telephones.
I remember when John Kennedy said that by the end of this decade, we're going to have a man on the moon. We're going to put a man on the moon.
I think the media put it to the American public that it was a race to beat the Russians to get in outer space.
And it was just really exciting, especially when they landed on the moon.
It was something that we thought was not possible, and here it was actually happening. We were watching it on television, a man from our country setting foot on the moon.
And it was pretty late at night, I remember, and just watching the whole mission as much as I could.
And of course today we've all been there, Russia and the United States.
And I think the public interest just doesn't seem to be there. People don't get it anymore, or at least they don't get excited about it anymore.
If I had my choice to be a senior in high school in 2000 or 1960, I would rather be a senior in 1960.
I think kids are a lot more informed now. They've got a lot more to know. I mean, all the scientific discoveries we made and so on. We didn't know about DNA then, or moonshots, any of that. You know, a rocket to the moon was science fiction to us. Now it's history to you.
1960, I'd rather graduate than it would be hard for me to imagine what it would be like now.
The idea of graduating from high school, either when I actually did in 1969 or graduating from high school in 2009, I love my life. I love the things that I've experienced in my life, and younger people will never experience the things I have experienced. They will experience their own things. So no, I wouldn't want to go. I wouldn't want to go forward as opposed to staying where I was. I like the way my life worked out.
I would like to thank my guests for taking time to participate. Clearly, the 60s was a different time. Life was slower paced and things were simpler. Compared to today, communications were limited to phones and letters. People were not distracted by cell phones and email, but communicated on a more personal level. Instead of an operator connecting our calls, we push one button on our cell phones. Interestingly, none of my guests would change the year they graduated. They are content with their place in time. I feel the same. I would like to have my own set of experiences just as my guests did.